Hey guys, what's up? Producer engineer Alex Scott here with Consordini.com. Thank you guys so much for checking out another one of our videos. Today I've got a bit of a production tutorial slash inspiration session for you guys. I want to talk a little bit about how I treat hip-hop beats, R&B beats, even like getting into some pop beat stuff. I want to take a look at a track that I'm working on currently and just show you guys a little bit how I approach layering my drums to get them to sound nice and polished, and punchy, professional, all that good stuff. The track that we're going to be taking a look at today is courtesy of a good friend of mine called Professor P. He is a UK-based artist, producer, rapper, singer. He's an awesome guy and a really, really great artist. So big shout out to Professor P for letting us take a look at this kind of track in progress. It's just an instrumental right now. Professor P will be rapping on it. We're also going to have a guest on this one, J.O. Felony of Gravediggers, which is we're really excited to get to collab with him. Kind of a West Coast hip hop legend. So that's going to be very, very cool once we get his parts in here. But again, for right now, it's just we're just taking a look at the instrumental. So this is definitely like a classic West Coast hip hop, you know, with a little bit of an R&B slant to it, a little bit of a jazzy slant. And, you know, there's all kinds of stuff going on. We got some guitar, we got some piano, different bass layers, synths, all that kind of stuff. But we're mainly just going to be focusing on the beat. Now, the one thing, or one of the things that I would like to think sets me apart from a lot of other producers is the fact that I use a lot of my own samples and a lot of my own sounds. Just in terms of like, everybody's got tons of sample packs, right? And you can find hi-hats and crashes and all kinds of different stuff that we can just drag into our projects and use. They already sound great. They're made by great companies or great producers. And I will definitely do a little bit of that. There's a few examples of that in this track. But one thing that can really help to set your production apart is having some of your own instruments that you're able to sample. So me being a musician first and foremost and kind of a producer second, you know, I have a couple really nice drum kits and a lot of snare drums and different cymbals. And then I also have a lot of like ethnic world percussion, tambourines, shakers, cowbells, tabla, different like hand drums and chimes and all kinds of different, you know, tricks and toys and stuff in my tracking room. And I will incorporate a lot of those elements into my beats because it's, you know, they're pretty easy instruments to record. You know, recording a full drum kit can be really tricky, but just recording a snare drum or a shaker or something, you pretty much can just point a mic at it and you're going to be in good shape. And, you know, that's going to give you a very different sound and access to some different timbres than that other producers won't have. You know, they're 100% original in your sound. So that's kind of the first thing before we even start looking at the track. That's one of the first things that you're going to hear. And one of the things I'm going to be talking a lot about and looking at is just these different elements that I've created myself to kind of blend in with those stock samples to give it, you know, a really unique, organic, kind of authentic vibe. And because, you know, especially if you're working on like classic hip hop, classic R&B, a lot of that is a little bit more organic than like modern trap rap or, you know, anything like that. It can, you know, again, it just brings some really cool textures to the party. So we've got our track pulled up here in Studio One, as you can see. We are going to be looking at the edit window here. I'll also be opening up the mix window so we can take a look at a couple of different elements, you know, in terms of plugins and stuff like that. We're not going to be focusing a ton on mixing in this video. I'm mostly just going to be showing you the different layers that I've got going on. So let's take a listen to the instrumental. So there you go. That's pretty much the meat of the track. You know, some other stuff comes in a little bit later on. But that's the bulk of what we've got going on. So taking a look at the beat specifically, I always split all of my purely rhythmic elements into kind of two groups. I look at it as like the main chunk of the beat, which is my hi-hats, kicks, snares. That's pretty much it. And then I'll have all my percussion elements, which in this track, you can see that there's quite a bit going on. And then I'll have some kind of crashes, accents. If I'm using any like reversed cymbals or kind of sparkly stuff on top, I'll put those in their own separate group as well. So now for the beat, the whole thing is based around my Arturia drum brute, okay? Now, we've done a video review of this on the channel. It's a fabulous all-analog drum machine. It sounds really, really cool, and it's incredibly versatile. So if we take a listen to just the drum brute, we've got the kick, the main kick pattern, and then we've got a clap and a little bit of open, closed hi-hats. Nice, simple, subdued. That's kind of that's the core of everything. Really simple. Now, I've got a couple of different snare drum layers going on, okay? Let me zoom in a little bit here so you guys can see more of what's going on. So this first one is a stock sample, adding just a little bit of extra kind of vibe and reverb. Then we have a second kick layer, adding a little bit of extra punch, okay? Another snare drum that's kind of a little bit darker, lower, grittier. More of like a classic hip-hop sound. And then we have this rim sample. And this is, I actually recorded on my real kit. And I'm doing a cross-stick rim with my left hand and then hitting the snare drum with my right hand. So that's adding a little bit of extra chunk to the snare. And then the last sample I have in here, this is called a kreb. Okay, I was in Morocco not too terribly long ago, and I picked up an instrument called the kreb, and it's basically like a little finger cymbal, kind of two sheets of metal that you kind of clap together, and I have a pair of them. So I just recorded a pass of me going, bam, bam, along with the snare drum, and it adds a really nice top end to it. So the whole beat all together, all those elements, we've got kind of a gritty snare, we've got a poppy snare with a little bit of reverb, we've got that, real bright kind of snatty sounding kreb, and they all come together to just make a really nice layered snare sound. And then with the kick drum, I've got the main kick from the drum brute and then a second kick sample just adding a little bit of punch to round out the top end attack of the snare of the kick drum. So that's the main bulk of the beat. And it's really simple, and it's a pretty solid sounding beat on its own. It's got nice bounce to it. But you can hear the hi-hats are a little bit more subdued, and I did that for a very good reason, because I have all these other percussion elements going on, okay? So this is where it gets into a lot of the more organic stuff. So, and you can build the dynamic through your track by bringing elements like this in and out, and as you can see, if you kind of look at the overall arrangement of everything, you can see we've got all these different percussive elements, but, obviously when it starts and we've got, just the beat and like a few, a tambourine, a couple of these tabla sounds, and then as it builds through the tune, by the end, you've got this much bigger, fuller groove, okay? So let's take a look at everything we've got going on in percussion world. So the first thing, which is a really cool element and kind of calls back to like Latin music and Afro-Cuban music, Latin jazz, is this triangle pattern. And this is all pretty much stuff that I've recorded here in the studio. So that's a triangle, like an orchestral triangle. And then I'm using some mixing effects on it to make it sound kind of darker and harsh, but not in an unpleasant way. So that's the first element. Then we've got some of these, I call them clacks. And that is, I'm drumming on the side of a djembe, okay, like on the rims of a djembe. And I've got 3 layers of that all kind of panned around. Okay, and it just adds a really nice, interesting bounce. And then we've got this little maraca sample that only happens at the end of the bar. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Right? So that's just kind of adding an extra accent to the turnaround, kind of the end of every bar. And then we've got a shaker, Just adding a little bit of texture. We've got 3 different tambourine sounds. Now, this is something I'm a really big fan of, is layering different tambourines and panning them around to get some really nice effects. So what I've got going on is I've got 2 main tambourines that are going chicka chicka chang, chicka 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 chang, and I've got those panned. And then I have a centered tambourine that's just accenting the 2 and the 4 and kind of is almost becoming a part of the snare drum. So those all together add some really nice, and especially when you add that shaker in there, it's just a really nice, you know, consistent 16th note thing going on. Then you blend in the clacks, and then that maraca at the end of every bar, that's kind of your topper, quote unquote, right? Then I also have some hi-hats. Doing a similar pattern. So we've got, you know what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different things all doing this same kind of 16th note rhythm, and it creates this lush little forest. And really gives the groove a lot of bounce. Then you've got that triangle in there doing kind of an accent pattern, right? Bump, bump, ba bump, 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 ba bump. Okay? So that's adding some dynamic to it. And then I also have these tabla samples that I recorded. Okay? And those are doing another rhythmic accent pattern. And it's more seldom. And those are helping to you know, it's just a different rhythmic accent that kind of shows up to bring a little bit more emotion and excitement to our groove. Now, when you blend those in with the rest of the beat, you've got something that feels and sounds really lush, really exciting. It's got a lot of dimension to it. But it's not overbearing. You know, even though we've got all these different elements, because of how I have them mixed, and you know, I'm being careful to like bandpass filter a lot of stuff so that it doesn't take up too much sonic room, you kind of end up with this beat that just glues itself together really, really nicely. And then, of course, we've got a couple of crash cymbals to kind of, you know, accentuate the starts of sections. I've got those tablas panned around a little bit so that they go bomb, bomb, one side to the other. And that's, you know, that's really it. That's the groove for the whole tune. And when you listen to the whole thing in context, you'll hear it like it, when you look at it on screen, it looks like there's a ton going on. But when you're careful with your mix and when you choose your elements wisely, it really, you know, it just creates this great rhythmic bed with, you know, a lot of bounce. It's like hip hop and R&B, and this stuff to me is all about the bounce. So yeah, it backs everything else up really, really nicely. So again, the whole tune in context now. Actually, we'll back it up to a section with some more of the instruments going on here. Where are we at? Right here. This is pretty good. And there you go. Really nice, really classic sounding West Coast hip hop beat. Now, if you're looking at like real classic hip hop production, like if you dig Jay Dilla or guys like that, a lot of times what they were doing is a lot simpler than this. You know, this is definitely a bit more of a modern take on how to make beats like this. You know, the most classic way to go about doing it is to just really, you know, pick some great simple drum samples and make a very basic beat out of those and then pump it up with a little bit of mix and you're usually good to go. They didn't do a ton of layering, right? But this is how we can get a bit of that vibe with the rhythms that we're using. This boom, 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 you know, it's a very classic rhythm, but because we're using some more of these modern layering techniques, we're getting a bit of the best of both worlds. We're getting a modern layered sound, and then we're also getting a really classic old school vibe because of the rhythm that we're using and the fact that it's a lot more organic sampled sounds. You know, it's not like all 808s or like crazy drum machines or anything. You know, there's real shakers and tambourines and all this, you know, snare drums, all this different kind of stuff in there. So it has a really classic feel, but again, also has an element of modernness to it because we're using these layering techniques. So, you know, and again, none of this is a rule. You know, if you're a hip hop producer, you don't have to layer stuff this way. You don't have to use organic, real instruments. You know, that can be tricky for guys because that means having microphones and owning the instruments or knowing somebody who can play them, that kind of stuff. But, you know, again, this video is less to be like, here's how you do it, and just taking a look at how I do it. And hopefully that's going to give you guys some inspiration to use in your own beats and maybe some new, fresh ideas and approaches that you guys can take when creating your own music. But in any case, what do you guys think? Do you have any cool techniques for layering drums for hip hop, R&B, pop music, anything like this? We'd love to hear any advice you guys have in the comments down below. We'd love hearing from you guys, so definitely head down there and let your voice be heard. But again, my name is Alex Scott with Consordini.com. Thank you guys so much for checking out another one of our tutorial videos. We really appreciate it, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.